So recently I did a couple of shorts, my first ever shorts actually, talking about my initial out of the theater reactions to Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer. And finally, here's my full review talking about everything that I have to talk about with this film. I do want to say I meant to do more Christopher Nolan reviews before this. I just got busy with other stuff and I couldn't get to those, but such is life. But as far as this film, one of my top 3 anticipated films of 2023, this film touches on the life of one J. Robert Oppenheimer, an American theoretical physicist who had a crucial role in the development of the nuclear bomb during the Manhattan Project. Before I continue with this film, let me tell you guys what I thought of Christopher Nolan's latest effort before this film, Tenet. And I gotta say, I wasn't the hugest fan of that film. It was still good. Christopher Nolan, no bad film, but it might honestly be my least favorite of his films, actually. Thinking about it, it is kind of self-indulgent. Areas where people should have stepped up and said, no, Christopher Nolan, we don't need sound that overpowers the dialogue. We don't need this one character to be so separate from our involvement emotionally. Some strange stuff with that film, but this leads into one of the things that I really like about Oppenheimer, and that is that it is a very different Nolan film. If Tenet was too much Nolan, this film is almost no Nolan, which allows all the other stuff, all the other aspects of the film, the main point of this video, to kind of step up and take center stage. If you were to show me this, without having the thing at the beginning that says a film by Christopher Nolan, without having the credits and nothing, if you just showed this film to me by itself and said, what did you think about it? And it's like, who directed it? I don't think I would have gotten to Christopher Nolan. That's how different this film is, and in a good way. This is very much a breath of fresh air for this director, him experimenting with new stuff, expanding on his craft. But as you can probably touch on with any of Christopher Nolan's films, the cast is fantastic, especially Cillian Murphy, which is just an incredible actor. Cillian Murphy does different things with his performance, where at times he seems like a character that you're not supposed to be invested in. He's just this very theoretical guy, just very high-end scientist, very brilliant, and sometimes, of course, brilliance can separate a character from being accessible. But there are also times in the movie where you get more emotion out of this character. Moments that do compellingly touch on Oppenheimer's sense of morality. And that's honestly when this film is at its strongest. When it is touching on this man's personal convictions as to what he has created. Seriously, one of my biggest fears going into this film was that I wasn't going to latch on to the characters enough. And I was pleasantly surprised with this film that Oppenheimer was actually well written, compelling, and just a great portrayal of this historical figure by a fantastic actor that continues to impress. He was great in Inception, he was great in Dunkirk, and this might be the role that defines Cillian Murphy for the rest of his career. This film has quite a great cast. Emily Blunt, Florence Pugh, our boy, Robert Downey Jr., good old Iron Man. He's in this movie, and they are all awesome as well. But on top of that, you get some other appearances that I didn't know about. I was so pleased to see these other people. It was crazy. I was watching the movie, and I was like, oh, that's... yeah. Oh. What? By the way, having a lot of characters, it means that this film is a lot of conversation scenes. Nolan works with that, and he makes these scenes still feel like they have a sense of momentum. And what helps is that this film is non-linear. It's this whole web of intrigue that even though a lot of the film isn't, the main thing of this movie, the nuclear bomb, it still manages to be very riveting. But also the ways that Nolan handles individual scenes of people talking. A lot of points it's in black and white, and it makes those sequences stand out. And in a way, it makes them more mysterious and almost kind of like shady once you figure out what's happening in the scene, who certain characters are, what their motivations are. But then there are also these great shots where Nolan will have a character in center frame talking, but then there's a character off to the side of the frame who's out of focus. And the whole time your eyes are trailing to this other character, wondering what are they thinking as this other character is talking? What would be their input in this conversation? And that adds some intensity as well. Of course, the most intense scene in this movie is the detonation, the first test of the nuclear bomb. It was, for me and probably a lot of people, one of the most anticipated cinematic moments of the year, and it doesn't disappoint. There's a great build-up to it throughout the whole film. You're learning about the dangers of what this bomb could possibly do, and just the whole film building up dread to this moment. That when it was actually happening, I felt my heart beating, and I wasn't quite sure what Christopher Nolan was going to show me. And even as it was happening, a certain way that Nolan structured that scene, it was still tense. That the only breath of air was in when it actually ended. But now let's get to the main point of this video and what inspired the title. Sometimes I think I need to record my thoughts for a video. I feel like I need to record my full review as soon as I come out of the theater. As soon as I watched it, I need to come here and talk about it. But then it's moments like with this film that I realize, no, it actually helps to kind of marinate, to just think for a while about what exactly you want to say about this film. What angle do you want to attack it from? So I thought about it for a while. There are certain scenes in this film, certain uses of imagery, that reminded me of a film I saw late last year called Blonde. And then I realized that there were elements of Elvis that actually are similar to things that these two films do. Thus, the trilogy, Elvis, Blonde, Oppenheimer. But let me tell you why I'm talking about this. Growing up, one of the main types of films I would watch was biopics. My parents were really into that kind of stuff. It's a genre that has a lot of films in it, and therefore it's created kind of this formula where you know what you're gonna expect with a biopic. It has a certain structure, a certain flavor, a certain way that it wants you to feel. But what really surprised me about these three films, every time I went in to watch one of them, I had that formula in mind, but it subverted my expectations every single time. And despite these films being drastically different, one from the other, they all share a common thread, a common trend now, it seems, with biopics, is that they're becoming more visual experiences. That unlike other biopics from the past, that were more plot-based and clear cause and effect in how the story would play out, but still, for the vast majority, these films have scenes that happen sequentially, that take place chronologically one after the other, but yet at times they can feel like standalone moments in space. And what these films focus on more than I would say the vast majority of other biopics I've ever seen is that they really focus on setting you in the mind space of all these different people. And how does it do that? It does it through a lot of visual storytelling. At various points in each of these three films, the visuals drive the narrative. In Elvis, all the visuals are very flashy, which lines up perfectly with the time period and Elvis himself. In Blonde, there's a lot that director Andrew Dominik does to line up Ana de Armas with footage from Marilyn Monroe, and shots that are crafted to perfection and just a lot of beauty in that film, while there also being a lot of sequences that are very surreal, and the usage of black and white emphasizing the side of the film where it's very much watching a nightmare play out. And then in Oppenheimer, we're even incorporating sound, where at times the movie is pretty loud and there's a lot of visuals of fire and everything associated with this nuclear bomb. The other similarity that all three of these films share is that they're each stories of people that have this huge thing happening around them, whether it's a singer or a person that's famous for helping out during the war. And they have this thing that's around them that's making them popular, that's making them noticed, that at times maybe, making them a celebrity. But in reality, that image to the public is covering broken lives. And these visuals put that to the forefront. They make you feel that aspect of the film with the visual aspects of the film at times being very much in your face, especially with Blonde. One of the things of biopics is that we go there to experience something that happened and to get the wonder associated with that. And each of these films have a sense of wonder about them, but that's not what they're all about. Once you get to the main thread of each of these films, there really is no glamour anymore. It's just reality. At times, these films aren't for everyone. I mentioned in the short that there are sequences in Oppenheimer that are going to be very satisfying. But after I said that, I thought about that more, and I thought about that there are also many parts in Oppenheimer that people aren't going to resonate with the film, that people are just going to think are kind of weird. It's not going to reach everybody. And that's very much true for the other two installments of my self-dubbed trilogy. I think for the most part, people did enjoy Elvis. I've also heard some people that don't like it. The fact that it is Baz Luhrmann and he's always very energized, and some people find that he's too over the top, and okay. Now, with Blonde, people hated that film. Some people hate it with such a passion, and it's something that for a while has annoyed me, because it was a film that disappointed me. I thought it was going to be up here with the talent involved. And yeah, I was definitely disappointed, but I still thought it had merit to it. I still thought it was solid. And then I look at some of these other people and I'm like, wow, what movie did you see? Side note, yeah, the movie is fiction. It is stuff that's being made up about this person, but it would be too much for me to explain in this video. But I get what Andrew Dominik and the other people involved with the film were going for on that front. The line between fiction and reality and what fiction can say about reality. More complex topic that I really can't go into much depth in here without going into so much of it. But very controversial movie that has scenes that are bad, weird stuff in there. That at times it is the movie that a lot of people are talking about, but then there are a lot of points where it does things that I thought were actually brilliant. But at the end of the day, if you love one of these films or you hate one of these films, the main thing to take away from this is that they're films that don't feel like they came out of some Hollywood conveyor belt. All three of these films, as different as they are from each other, they each feel like a director that had a vision and they went forward with that. They're biopics that don't feel like they have to reach for the widest audience available. They don't feel like they have to please everyone at all times. Which, when I was thinking about this, I recalled the film Bohemian Rhapsody, which I've never seen. I do intend to watch it someday. I have it in my 4K Blu-ray collection, but I've heard a lot from that movie that it skipped over certain aspects of Freddie Mercury's life, and it was a very polished film and just kind of there to please a lot of people, which is fine. Some films do need to do that. But what I found out of these three films is that they're there to tell the story that they need to tell, no matter how dark it gets. And looking at these, I wonder if it's actually an area in which Hollywood is actually changing. That this genre, such as the biopic genre, which has a lot of films already, is become very formulaic. But let's try new things with this established genre and make it something new. Yeah, I probably went on a tangent there, talking about other films and not focusing on Oppenheimer, but I thought that Oppenheimer is an interesting piece of all of that. So everything that I just mentioned still applies to this film. Oppenheimer, I thought, was really good. I do have some issues with it, though, and I feel like at times the movie does get a bit more convoluted than it should be. It's touching on Oppenheimer and all these security issues that happened during the Manhattan Project. Not going to get too much into it. It's this whole thing that creates a web of intrigue that at many points is still riveting, but I couldn't help but feel like it was straying away from the meat of the movie, the nuclear bomb, which after you get to that one point where they do the test and then the movie goes from there, I felt like the movie hit a point somewhere where it could have ended and it would be an equally compelling movie. But it just keeps going on after that with other stuff. I just didn't feel like it always paid off. And like I said, it was convoluted. Huge cast. that maybe didn't need to be as huge as it was, and it actually did add more confusion to the story because there were more moving parts. So in the end, I appreciated that Christopher Nolan did this new, unique thing for his filmography. And I like what this film and the other films present as far as furthering biopics. Now, as this film by itself, it is a bit disappointing, like I mentioned with the issues. It doesn't always reach the heights that I think it needed to reach. Still very riveting in a lot of parts, great cast. Again, Nolan, masterful director, and he just proves it once again with this film. I'm going to give Oppenheimer a B+. This was something that I was thinking about for this video, but I wasn't quite sure what to do with it, but then I realized I would just leave it up to the comment section. Give your thoughts on Oppenheimer, or give a name to this trilogy that I created here today. Whatever it is, comment that down below. Guys, I've done so many reviews over the summer. I reviewed Mission Impossible leading up to Dead Reckoning. I reviewed Indiana Jones leading up to Dial of Destiny. I even did a review for Transformers Rise of the Beasts. You can check that out in playlists. I'll even link some up here. I've created a separate playlist with all of my 2023 reviews so far, which this film will be a part of. Guys, I'll see you next time.